Moving on to another area, and that is health. Now, health has been obviously a huge concern of human beings, pain and suffering, ill health, and until very recently there was nothing people could do much about it. Little was known about it, and there were only traditional medicines to deal with most illnesses. The first big change occurred in the later 19th century when, with the discovery of bacteria and viruses and research onto epidemic diseases, a number of the great epidemic diseases, bubonic plague, malaria and others, began to be dealt with. And then the second great breakthrough was in the 1930s and 40s with the antibacterial substances, penicillin and so on. And suddenly now, human beings, their whole life has been changed in much of the developing world at least, because they live 10, 20 years longer. The diseases that would have killed them in their 60s and 70s now just make them a bit ill and they recover. So this has had a huge effect on demography, on life expectancy, but also on medicine. And certainly in Britain and many countries, we're facing a health crisis because our hospitals cannot cope and our doctors cannot cope. They're dealing with the double pressure of an aging population with many endemic diseases which are expensive to cure and preoccupy a lot of the time and energy of doctors and hospitals, and the escalating cost of pharmaceuticals and drugs. And as a result, there are calls to pump more and more of national resources into health, and the results become worse and worse. So that's what's happened, and the solution is not out of sight. And that is basically something similar to what was developed in China during the communist period, the famous barefoot doctor idea. The idea then was you had very little money, a huge population which was needing healthcare, and so you sent out people who had had minimal training, a month or two of simple training. They were given a few really basic medicines in a rucksack or other ways of carrying it, and they went and travelled around dealing with many of the perennial irritating health problems. I did experience this myself in a Himalayan village where there was no health post or hospital anywhere nearby when I first went, and I just bought medicines in the bazaar, and much of the ill health in the village, like cuts and sores and septic sores and sore throats and worm infestations, many of them could be dealt with by someone like myself with a little manual where there is no doctor kind of manual. And I could diagnose that this child was suffering from worm infestation or had an eye sore or there was a goiter or whatever, and I could give the appropriate medicines. Now, if you rolled this idea out, if you stopped spending all your money on expensive medicines and on institutionalizing health in large hospitals, the 19th century solution to economies of scale, and you decentralized health to a system which I've seen also working in China, where you have local health posts in every village. You employ people who have either retired health workers, and there are usually one or two in every English village, certainly, nurses and doctors and midwives, and they, either for a very small sum of money or voluntarily, look after a small health post which has all the basic medicines and a good computer, because much advice on health now comes, of course, from the internet, and even doctors, the first thing they do when they're presented with symptoms, I've seen, is they look up on the web to see what it might be. Well, anyone can do that, more or less. So basically, these small health posts, staffed by amateur, partly trained people, deal with, I think, probably 90% of the health worries of an ageing population and others. The 10% they decide they can't deal with goes up to a small regional hospital in China, and they deal with another 90% of whatever the ailments are. That means only something like 1% really requires to go to a specialist big hospital, as in our area, Addenbrooke's. And that would free a huge amount of wealth and doctor's time, and it wouldn't be difficult to do a devolution down of health to the local level. And given the previous things I've talked about, increasing leisure and professional time, it's an obvious solution.